This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, we are continuing on in Sri Nisargadatta's I Am That. We are quite a ways into chapter 61. Matter is consciousness itself. And we've been discussing samadhi and the experience of samadhi, and now he has asked for instructions. Oops. Oh my goodness. All right. So we're on the paragraph. The question is, I see your point now. How am I to go into samadhi? So, which is the question. All of us want to know how to get into samadhi. Well, samadhi, as we're going to see here in a few minutes, is really our natural state of being. That there's nothing supernatural about it. That it is the way that we are intended to see the world, where everything is divine. That flicker of the divine in is everything. So he says, "You see, I see your point. Now, how am I to go into samadhi?" And Maharaj says, "If you are in the right state, whatever you see will put you into samadhi. After all, samadhi is nothing unusual. When the mind is intensely interested, it becomes one with the object of interest. The seer and the seen become one in seeing. The hearer and the heard become one in hearing. The lover and the loved become one in loving. Every experience can be the ground for samadhi." So you see that Ramakrishna used to see particular experiences. You know, he saw that British boy leaning on the tree with his knee bent across his other leg, like Krishna playing the flute. You know, we've got that story of that old man who saw somebody walking with a cane that was made from the same wood that Krishna's flute was made from. We had one of Ramakrishna's relatives every day when the worker's horn would go off, they would think that that was Krishna's flute playing in the distance. They would have a spiritual experience. So you see, if the mind is pure, everything is God. And so anything, any combination of anything could be the ground or the cause of putting you into samadhi, because it would just take the mind and the mind would soar to directly into the heart of the divine. And so, and he says it's nothing unusual, you know, which means it's not a supernatural thing. It's a rare thing, oddly enough, but not unusual in the sense that, like we mentioned earlier, it's 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 our natural state of being. It's what it is to be perfectly human. You know, we are just to be perfectly human is to be perfectly in love with the moment and anything that it contains, right? But in that order, you're in love with the moment, which is the divine, and whatever it contains by necessity is perfect, is beautiful, and so you accept it as such. So, are you always in the state of samadhi, Maharaj? Well, of course not. Samadhi is a state of mind, after all. I am beyond all experience, even of samadhi. I am the great devourer and destroyer. Whatever I touch dissolves into void, akash. All right, so we can't even really make a comment about that state of mind, that state of being that he's talking about. That he's beyond a dharma and adharma at that point. I mean, he really is. That's definitely the Advaitic perspective up there. Questioner, I need samadhis for self-realization. Maharaj, you have all the self-realization you need. Okay, there's something we should sit and let that soak in for a moment. You have all of the realization you need, but you do not trust it. This is an important little piece right here. See how this fits in your inner world. You have all the self-realization you need, but you do not trust it. Have courage. Trust yourself. Go, talk, act. Give it a chance to prove itself. With some, realization comes imperceptibly, but somehow they need convincing. They have changed, but they do not notice it. Such spectacular cases are often the most reliable. That's a very interesting thing he says there, that samadhi can come upon one without them even noticing it. Or realization, not samadhi, but realization. This understanding that they are not body mind can come upon them and not really notice it, right? But they are fully aware inside. But they're carrying on, right? They've changed, but they don't notice it. Why? Because they're not body mind centered. So they're not thinking about the conditions and states of body mind. And so they're going on, being carried along in that divine carriage, as it were, in the shrine of the heart there, and completely oblivious to the fact that they've realized their true nature, right? But are carried on in bliss, just going on, not bothering to go and do a self-analysis because they don't have an ego to do such a self-analysis. That's what creates the ego. That's actually the essence of the formation of the ego. Oops, somebody's here and I haven't let them in yet. Just a moment. All right.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
To let Norman in too.
Yes, here she comes. Amrit.
Yeah, Amit.
All right. Excellent. What a harrowing journey you've had. Come in, have a cup of tea. All right. So you have all of the self-realization that you need. You are what you are, right? So there's nothing to be attained. You don't have to. It's not a going and getting or a building or collecting something. You have everything that you need, but you do not trust it. Right? You do not trust it because you think look, that can't possibly be true. I am that. We're nervous about that thought. We're nervous about that experience.
Give me that book.
Right? And so let me
No.
here real quick.
No, that's one.
And so it's just a matter of really just trusting the experience inside. But the way we're going to talk about it, because we're bhaktas who are looking at jnana, in this case, that in our case, this trust is in that grace. That trust is in the love of the divine, right? That trust is where we place ourselves in order to accept these truths, that everything is fine. It's through that grace that we're willing to set down our karma, right? We trust that God has covered us. We trust that grace is enough for us. And so slowly we move our relationship with God out of our ego sense, where it's a matter of performance and does he love me? Does he not love me? Does he care about me? Does he not care about me? Am I forgiven? Am I not forgiven? Is he gonna, what's going on? It moves from that space, which is ego space, which is why we're insecure, that accuser in there. The ego's also named the accuser. That it keeps us in that insecure state. And so through this constant returning to the grace of the divine, of your beloved, gathering your courage in that, gathering your firm conviction that it is there, and accepting it, will transform your center of consciousness. It will move your consciousness out of that ego attacked state, and it will then naturally rest in the place which is its natural rest, which is actually the shrine of the heart. That is the natural home for our sense of being. But we're all caught up in here, because we live in the computer age. So everything is in mind. So he says, have courage, trust yourself, go, talk, act, give it a chance to prove itself. With some, realization comes imperceptibly, but somehow they need convincing. They have changed, but they do not notice it. Such non-spectacular cases are often the most reliable. Questioner, well, can one believe himself to be realized and be mistaken? Maharaj, of course. The very idea I am self-realized is a mistake. There is no I am this or I am that in our natural state. So this is that infuriating thing. After we've managed to quote accomplish this incredibly rare and mystical experience of samadhi, Swami Brahmananda will just look over at you and say, finally you're normal. Right? No celebration, just, gosh, finally you're normal. So that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to be normal human beings, just a walking atmosphere of love. All right, chapter 62. In the Supreme, the witness appears. Questioner. Oh, it's a long question. Get ready. Some 40 years ago, J. Krishnamurti said that there is life only, and all talk of personalities and individualities has no foundation in reality. He did not attempt to describe life. He merely said that while life need not and cannot be described, it can be fully experienced if the obstacles to its being experienced are removed. All right, very interesting. The main hindrance lies in our idea of and our addiction to time, in our habit of anticipating a future in the light of the past. The sum total of the past becomes the I was. The hoped for future becomes the I shall be. And life is a constant effort of crossing over from what I was to what I shall be. The present moment, the now, is lost sight of. Maharaj speaks of I am. Is it an illusion like I was and I shall be? Or is there something real about it? And if the I am too is an illusion, how does one free oneself from it? The very notion of I am free of I am is an absurdity. Is there something real, something lasting about the I am, in distinction with the I was or the I shall be, which change with time as added memories create new expectations? Maharaj, the present I am is as false as the I was and the I shall be. Oh boy, now we're in trouble. He's going to go into a transcendent. I mean, he's talking about a transcendent state, where there's not an I to am, right? And so in that transcendent state, there's just am, right? There's no I. So the present I am is as false as the I was and the I shall be. It is merely an idea in the mind, an impression left by memory. And the separate identity it creates is false. This habit of referring to a false center must be done away with. The notion I see, I feel, I think, I do must disappear from the field of consciousness. What remains when the false is no more is real. Right? Now, why did he do that? Why doesn't he just say something? Why doesn't he just tell us? It's because what remains is eternal, which means it's outside of time. And since it's outside of time, it doesn't have any of the requirements of mind to be conceived. It doesn't have space or causation, right? The mind requires any one of those triads that we talk about in order to create a concept. It needs time, space, causation, or it needs past, present, future, or it needs subject, object, verb. It has to have, and I still haven't, I know there's some profound relationship between those three triads, but they won't resolve in my mind yet. But I think there's a way of saying all three of them at once, but I haven't figured it out yet. So time, space, causation, past, present, future, subject, object, verb. Any of those three triads have to be present in order for a thought to occur, in order for a concept, a conceiving to happen. And since when we get that sorry, when we get that that what, when you find that silent, when you find that silent space, when you find that quiet, and when you first gather a gem or two, you're not established, but you're getting there for a brief second to like, ooh, wow, what was that? And then it's lost for another 12 years. But but you come there, and this knowing of ourself is a beautiful knowing, right? It's a beautiful knowing when you get that close, or even within the real proximity of that love within yourself, that source, you find that there's the only response is very similar to just an open mouth, where you're just like, there is, you can't get it into the mind to say something, right? And if you're
Maharaj, just
uh-huh.
can you go over the triads one more time?
Yes, yeah, there's three of them, oddly enough. There's a triad of triads: time, space, causation, subject, object, verb, past, present, future. Yeah, so past, present, future, I guess, could fall under the time of space and causation. And the subject, object, verb could fall under space. And causation. Yeah, so you could put all three of them just under time, space, causation. The other two are subsets.
It's the seer and the seen. That's not among the triads.
That's the subject, object, verb.
Okay.
The seer, the seen, and the act of seeing. Yeah. All right. So the I see, I think, I feel, I do must disappear from the field of consciousness. Why? Because all of those experiences are of the particular by the particular. You are the universal. So there's no one experiencer. And there's no one experience. And so this, it seems to me, in my playings, in my own mind on these ideals, is that this is the one biggest transition. I think this is the stop. This is the roadblock that really holds most of us up for a long time. And that is, we are so accustomed to being a particular and having a particular experience, right? It's one-to-one all the time. But in our real nature, we are not a person. We are not a particular. We are everything, and everything that is happening simultaneously. So we're both the cause and the effect, right? We're both the thing that's beautiful and the one looking at it, and the beauty is the reality between us. And so this ability to let go of our particular perspective is what keeps us from understanding our true nature, because we can't conceive of a self that is everywhere, that's not experiencing a particular from a particular, right? But is the container of all things happening simultaneously in perfect harmony, perfect oneness, outside of time. Anyway. So this I see, I feel, I think, I do must disappear from the field of consciousness. What remains when the false is no more is real. And that's the thing, the reason he's saying it in that weird way is because that is the thing that just leaves your mouth open. There's it in a sense, you're experiencing it in a sense, but you're not separate from it in a sense. you know. So this irritates our questioner. He says, what is all this big talk about elimination of the self? How can the self eliminate itself? What kind of metaphysical acrobatics can lead to the disappearance of the acrobat? In the end, he will reappear, mightily proud of his disappearing. A very true statement, right? This sense of I. How are we going to get rid of the self? Well, of course, there's levels of self, right? There's the small s, which can be graduated into infinite numbers of selves that we experience, right? And so that's the one that has to die, is that small self, the small self of the particular, the ego self. That's always measuring and calculating and creating thoughts and making plans for achieving them. And
could you tell about the intermediate selves between the very, very small s self and then the biggest s self?
Yeah. I mean, it could be perceived in one way as an infinite graduation. I mean, from 1 to 100, as it were. That the more body identified you are, the lower your realization of self, the understanding of your true nature is. The more you think spirit is real, the more you experience spirit inside. To that degree, you're moving toward the capital S. So it's a graduated, it's a graduated growth that can be interrupted anywhere, and Mother can just interject samadhi at will. So it's not a law. We can't say this is a graduated thing everybody has to go through.
Does Vedanta connect it with chakras by any chance, or it?
Yes, yeah, you could connect it to the chakras and Patanjali's idea there, and as Thakur talks about your consciousness rising. Yeah, it's basically from the first chakra to the top is the journey from material to spirit, from being body based to being spirit based. In our concept of who we are. So what is all this big talk? Maharaj, you need not chase the I am to kill it. Right? That's a very interesting statement. You don't have to chase the I am in order to kill it. You cannot. All you need is a sincere longing for reality. You have to want to see the truth more than you want to see the delusion. That seems very easy and very obvious. We'd be like, well, of course I want the truth. Well, no, of course you don't, right? Because if this is all it takes, then all of us would be realized. See? And so this is why we do our discerning. This is the process of discernment inside, so that we can weaken that attachment, that white knuckling that we are doing on holding on to our delusion of reality because it's comfortable and feels safe most of the time, right? If we admit the fact that we don't know anything, then life gets quite difficult to maneuver. It takes a lot of faith at that time. So you don't have to chase the I am to kill it. You cannot. All you need is a sincere longing for reality. We call it Atma Bhakti, the love of the Supreme, or Moksha Sankalpa, the determination to be free from the false. Without love and will inspired by love, nothing can be done. Merely talking about reality without doing anything about it is self-defeating. There must be love in the relation between the person who says I am and the observer of that I am. Gosh, he's making a case for bhakti yoga right here in the middle of his Advaita. This is phenomenal. There must be love. This is a new thing here to me, I'm afraid I have to say. Although I think this is what we've been shooting at with this Jnana Bhakti path that Ramakrishna talks about in the Gospel. There must be love in the relationship between the person who says I am and the observer of that I am. right? So that inner observer of who you are and the ego who you are, there has to be a love. There has to be a love relationship. There has to be an attraction, right? And since love is the only attracting force in the universe, that's what it's going to be. Good morning, Liz. And so you need not chase the I am to kill it, right? So there must be love in the relation between the person who says I am and the observer of that I am. So you see, God, the whole thing is happening within. There's the person who says I am, right? That's the ego self, the person who says I am, because he's taking on a quality of being, and the observer of that I am, that silent witness which we may not have yet found or realized in ourselves. As long as the observer, the inner self, the higher self, considers himself apart from the observed, the lower self despises it and condemns it, the situation is hopeless. All right? It is only when the observer accepts the person as a projection or manifestation of himself, and so to say, takes the self into the self, the quality of I and this goes in the identity of the outer, and the inner, the supreme reality, manifests itself. Wow, that is a beautiful, very helpful description there for us. Wow.
Could you please reread it again for us?
Yes, most definitely. This beautiful, this whole thing, very important. Wow. Wow. You need not chase the I am to kill it. You cannot. All you need is a sincere longing for reality. We call it Atma Bhakti, the love of the Supreme, or Moksha Sankalpa, the determination to be free from the false. Without love and will inspired by love, nothing can be done. Merely talking about reality without doing anything about it is self-defeating. There must be love in the relation between the person who says I am and the observer of that I am. As long as the observer, the inner self or the higher self, considers himself apart, right, separate from the observed, the lower self, if he despises it and condemns it, then the situation is hopeless. It is only when the observer accepts the person as a projection or manifestation of himself. This is that beautiful internal love that we're talking about. That love that heals that rift within you between the self that you find yourself being or have identified yourself as being, and your true ideal of yourself, which you're always trying to become, right? That ideal self has to stop being in the position of judgment, rejection, and a disapproval, and has to accept your lower self, has to accept the ego self as a projection of itself. So it has to see that they're the same, right? And that the foundation of that is love. And through that healing, the duality heals, as it were, in the way that he's talking about it. The duality heals as those two, as the divine self accepts the ego self as a projection of itself, right? But understand the sense of I am has to be moved into that larger self in order to accept the ego as a projection of itself, right? The sense of I am has to move into that higher self, right? Through grace, through the acceptance of grace, and then accept the ego self as its own projection, as its own shadow, and thereby losing that judgment, that distinction, that accusational, whatever keeps us separate, that rejection in there. All right, let me just keep reading, and then we'll talk about it as soon as afterwards. As long as the observer, the inner self or the higher self, considers himself separate from the observed, the lower self, and despises it and condemns it, the situation is hopeless. It is only when the observer, your higher self, accepts the person, the ego self, the lower self, as a projection or a manifestation of himself, and so to say, takes the self into the capital self, the duality of I and this goes. And in the identity of the outer and the inner, the supreme reality manifests itself. Right? So when the identity moves to the supreme, then it consciously begins to manifest itself through the ego, diminishing the ego. And for a period there, we put our ego in relationship to this divine spirit or this divine reality as either servant, lover, friend, child, wife, I don't know, any of the 5 traditional relationships you can have. And through that relationship, the ego is thinned. And as that ego is thinned and the sense of I am moves out of the mind, out of the changing, observing of itself, and rather into the observer, right? Which moves you into a more spontaneous state of being. And in that, you then observe the ego self and see it, but you know that it is an expression of you. There's not a separation. It's just a subset. Your ego is a subset of yourself, right? And then you come and accept that. And through that acceptance, that acceptance and grace, really, that ego is slowly dismantled. If you're an extraordinary practitioner, you can take it, it can go all the way down until it's gone. And then there's samadhi and oneness, and you're, as Greg used to say, Om Ram Bingo finished. You've crossed the line. So, and most of us are at different points in that process, although the process is not the same for everybody. It happens according to your own individual fun with God. So, and on what we just read there, is there anything, I think to truly understand it is to go into samadhi. Yes, Lydia. Hope you're muted. You're muted.
Is that the same as in the Bible referred to as the marriage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's what the way St. John of the Cross, as you know, he talks about it, that works can take you to the chasm. It can take you to you can clean up your own self up to a point within the Christian ideal, because you're real. Christians are real. Hindus we're not real. But so yes, and so when he says, what do you do when you get to the chasm? Well, only grace can take you across the chasm. So you have to wait for the beloved to come and consummate your marriage. And so what do? Well, you create a bridal chamber within your heart, and you spend your time purifying and cleaning and scenting and decorating and, being there in anticipation of the arrival of the bridegroom. And then, yes, the bridegroom, the consummation of that marriage is in Vedanta realization, the return to one without a second. And in Christianity, in some aspects of Christianity too. I read that wonderful Dominican book on the Advaita, on non-duality as a doctrine of Christianity. So there's at least one Christian monk out there who believes that non-duality is the ultimate realization for Christians also. So interesting, as it is.
Another question about this. So the observer have to accept the imperfections of the ego self, right? That's
yes. Well, not necessarily. Yes. Except in a different way, though. Except by understanding that those actions do not belong to him directly, that they are simply one of his many manifestations.
Right, but I thought the observer is actually the ego. The observer is the witness consciousness. I thought the ego attributed false to itself, while observer was the one that was judgeless, judgmentless. So
Yes. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true from a perspective. He is bringing it down a little bit and giving it a quality. But what he's really focusing on is this adverse relationship that we have inside between our ideal of ourself and our working self, as it were, right? That we want to become this perfection because we're identifying with the imperfect, right?
So the observer is this, it's not the absolute witness consciousness. The observer is some sort of like, I don't know, like the intermediate ego self.
No, the observer is, as we go closer and closer to the one without a second, we drop attributes.
Right.
The observer is one step away from dissolution. So there is a sense of I from which something is being observed, right? And there is a sense of other because there is something to observe. So we're not talking from the highest self, we're talking from the higher self.
Okay,
Right.
so the higher self says, okay, you've got, and also another question that he says you have to will inspired by love, was earlier, a bit earlier you said. So will, he says like will is absolutely necessary to will inspired by love, which makes sense, but it is necessary for the practice, right?
Yes, yeah, there within Maya, will is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, nothing happens. Tamas takes complete control if there's no will, right? And so having a will, which means having an understanding of why am I always up and down? Why are my pleasures always temporary? You know, why do I have the sense of being the same person all the time, and yet the body and mind are constantly changing? So those things start to load up inside, and we start developing a desire for freedom. Like we start getting an idea, and then Mother sends a guru, gives an experience, and then
But will kind of implies to me, at least in my understanding, some sort of action towards like practice, or you get yourself to sit down and actually do meditate or whatever, some sort of a spiritual practice.
those are indicators of will. Yes, they are. But they are necessary in this in when we're in Maya. They're not a part of the great picture, but they are necessary to move us forward. And really, I again think that the key to this is grace. The key to even developing that devotion is grace, and acting out of grace, and studying grace, and contemplating grace, and being giving yourself, getting that courage that he was talking about earlier, that courage and that willingness to step off the edge. Because when you're stepping out of ego into the reality, there's no floor. And the ego lives in a world where floors are required. You can't have a room without a floor. And so, but for the spirit, no floor is required. There's nothing to fall, nowhere to fall. You are your own inhabitants. And so, getting ourselves to take that step is very difficult. And so love becomes both the impetus for taking that step and the reward of taking that step. It's and becomes also the safety that we're going to be okay when we take that step. Right? Yeah.
Is this kind of like being in the womb?
Yeah,
You know,
you could see it that way. I think it's less complex to picture yourself as a piece of fruit hanging on a tree. You are the tree, but you're looking at yourself as a piece of fruit, and you're like, how can I be the tree? I have nothing in common with that tree at all. Nothing. I don't have any leaves. I don't have a trunk. I don't have any roots. How in the world am I going to become a tree? Right. And so, but what can it do but hang there on the branch? Right. but it has to hang there on the branch, and it ripens, right? It ripens, and it holds within itself the potential of anything that comes for that, the potential of all things. So anyway, it's a matter of ripening, and I like those terms because it doesn't have, there's no doership involved in ripening. There's a lot of patience, and there's a lot of steady awareness. You have to place yourself in the light to ripen, right? So that's your practice, placing yourself in the light. When you sit and do your meditation, you're sitting in the light of your beloved, and that's where you're ripening. And that should be your attitude while you're sitting there. You're sitting there and offering yourself completely to that light and letting that light change all the things that need to change within you to bring you to ripeness. But you're not doing it. You're just letting it, allowing the process through being conscious and aware and placing yourself in the light and being available, being available to that divine power, that divine light.
So if one once experiences this divine love or power or presence, then I think this love or longing, maybe longing is another word for love.
Yeah, well, longing, yes. Longing is when you believe you don't have something and you really want it. We believe that we don't have love.
Right.
Right. And so we're longing for it. We go looking
Right.
for it.
But for as long as we don't have it, like if you experienced it like once, then you have this longing, right?
Well, it's more the fact that you have to realize to some extent that you do have it. And once you realize that it is within you, that it is available to you, it's like that parable of Ramakrishna when he says, if you put a thief in a room and tell him the room next door is full of gold, what's he going to do? He's going to think of any possible way to get to it. And so once you come to know, either through someone telling you or a divine experience or spiritual growth, once you come to know that within you lies an infinite well of love that will set you free from any need of anything external to you, people's approval, proper attributes, proper glories, name and fame and those things. Once you realize that you have the antidote to all of that insecurity within you, then your earnestness increases, then your sincerity increases. And that takes you a little ways down the road, and then a little bit more sincerity increases because it becomes a little bit more real to you. And you've understood a little bit more and seen a little bit more. And as you discern, and realize that your love of chocolate was actually a love for the divine in chocolate. And you learn to look through the chocolate to see God, who is the attracting force in chocolate, right? And you start understanding that it is God in everything, because all those attributes, are of God. The thing in your desires that you're actually attracted to is always a name of God. And so by discerning that, and by running that through your mind over and over and over again, eventually, one by one, all of your loves for 1,000 different things becomes a singular love for God that was shining, that was being reflected in 1,000 different little things that you confused with God. And so as that unity happens little by little in us, that love for God naturally becomes more and more powerful until it's so powerful we're overwhelmed by it. That's samadhi. That is samadhi. So it is only when the observer accepts the person as a projection or manifestation of himself, and so to say, takes the self into the self, the duality of I and this goes, and the identity of the outer and inner, the supreme reality, manifests itself. This union of the seer and the seen happens when the seer becomes conscious of himself as the seer. He is not merely interested in the seen. Okay, so this is what we're always talking about, having that selfie stick. When you put the camera at the far end, you're only paying attention to that far end and what it's seeing. You're not paying any attention to you holding the stick, right? That's incidental. And we want that to go the other way around, right? We want, instead of being interested in everything the camera's seeing, we want to get to a place where everything the camera sees reminds me that I'm the seer. Reminds me that I'm the one that's making it beautiful or ugly or, worthwhile or not worthwhile. All of that. So this union of the seer and the see happens. This union of the seer and the seen happens when the seer becomes conscious of himself as the seer. He is not merely interested in the seen, which he is anyhow, but also interested in being interested, giving attention to attention, aware of being aware. Affectionate awareness is the crucial factor that brings reality into focus. Beautiful, beautiful. Affectionate awareness, right? That's exactly like Brother Lawrence. He says a fond regard. He developed a general fond regard for the moment, right? By seeing God in it at whatever level. So that fond regard grows and grows as we realize and see more and more of the presence in the moment that we've forgotten over time. As that begins to clear and begin to see, then this joy of the moment, it's when you start becoming aware. This was very useful for me in conquering that depression, was one, to realize this moment is always new. It is the purest thing we'll ever encounter, right? And this moment is us, and reality just flows through it. This seeming reality, sorry about that, this seeming reality flows through it, right? But we are that existence. We are what everything flows through, but we're untouched by it. We cannot be dirtied by it or impurified by it, right? Because the moment itself is the check to all impurity. It is the holder of all things and is not pure or impure, right? And so this experience of existence, if you just sit and ask yourself, I exist, what does that mean? And go inside and begin trying to figure out how you know that you exist. And bliss comes cracking out from all different little directions in little tiny spurts. It's not a big samadhi event, but to go in and just touch your existence is a releaser of your bliss, your divine bliss. You'll see it in there. And so to use that constant awareness of the moment, you're never stuck. You're never stuck. In the moment, you are always given choice to move anywhere, go any direction. You do not have to follow your samskaras. You do not have to follow your karmas. You just have to be aware of your samskaras and be aware of your karmas. And then you're in charge of them. You'd be like, yeah, it's true. I do that all the time. I'm not going to do it today. Yeah, it's true. I've, always felt that way, but I don't feel that way today. Give yourself that permission to be free in this moment, like nobody's business. And it's amazing, right? You can lay down all of your stuff before Mother and never worry about it again. That's the kind of grace we want to grow and understand, so that we can really lay stuff down and really not pick it up again, right? And really slip into this divine human that has always been our nature and will always be our nature. All right. We're going to stop there just because that's a good place. Let me turn off our recorder.